Oh, let's try again. Okay, we have a problem. Okay, today we're going to be talking about early hip extension and exactly what you guys need to be doing to get rid of it. But first things first, we kind of need to understand exactly what it is that we're referencing and what is early hip extension. So to clarify exactly what early hip extension is, what happens in the golf swing is we have to rotate around our spine angle. And ideally, we have to maintain some pretty good angles to control how that club is going to move around the ball. But the early hip extension is when the hips are shooting closer towards your target line at the start of the downswing, as opposed to maintaining what would be classed, and which will become much clearer in this video, hip depth. Now again, what does happen in the golf swing is we would swing back, we would start to rotate our hips, and then we will trigger an element of extension. But again, the key word here is early hip extension. So something is happening in your brain that is triggering you to extend too early, and today's video is really going to help you out uncovering exactly what it is that you're doing. The question would be, what should be happening? Well, what we've got today is we've got a great opportunity to take a look at Dustin Johnson, and what I've done on here is you can see that white line across the backside there. Okay, so that's kind of known as the tush line. So the first thing that we can kind of identify is in this backswing position, the way that he gets his right hip back on that tush line. That's definitely going to be stage number one. But as we keep watching him here, if we start to look at what happens in the start to the downswing, you can kind of start to see as he starts to trigger rotation and that left hip comes back, can you kind of see the way it goes back on towards the tush line? Now, this is going to be a really key thing in the big difference between what we've already described as an early hip extender. An early hip extender would be moving away from that white tush line, whilst we can see DJ maintains that tush line. Another perspective here. So this is, again, the same golf swing, obviously from the face-on perspective, and we're really highlighting here, shall we say, the angle of the pelvis. So you can kind of see in this backswing position, he keeps the pelvis pointing down towards the ground. As he completes the top of the backswing position, starts to trigger a little more extension at the top, but then what we can start to see is as we start to reinitiate this start to the downswing here, in this area like so, start to see the way that pelvis moves back down towards the ground. And again, that's going to be a real key thing for those early hip extenders, kind of pointing that pelvis too horizontally too quickly, and kind of see the way DJ keeps it pointing much more down towards the floor. Just a quick one, hopefully you're enjoying the video so far. Also, if you press that subscribe button, it helps me out in a big way. Press the bell icon, means you receive notifications every time a new video comes out. Let's crack back on with tackling this early hip extension. Okay, so to clarify two things. The first one, if I sort of put my hands across the lower part of my stomach, because that's going to be a key area for you guys to practice at home. And what we saw was the way that DJ rotated back, and then as he started his downswing, he pulled that lead hip back. That's a key move, as opposed to an early hip extender who moves more this way. Now, what I'm also demonstrating is, if you look at my hands, see the way that if I demonstrate the early hip extender, the way the back of my hands point much more horizontal. And what we saw with DJ is the way that as he started his downswing, he went back into more of a state of flex, which basically just means he went back downward facing. So again, this is going to be a big difference between golfers that are this way and struggling for consistency in contact, as opposed to golfers that can learn to move more this way. So now we understand the theory. How are you guys going to put it into practice? Well, this is going to help you out in a big way. Laser pens are things that I've mentioned before on the channel, and they're a really useful practice aid, because this might not be as complicated as it often sounds. So what I'm going to do with the laser pen is I'm going to hold it, like I was referring to earlier, let's just say just beneath my sort of belly button region here. And I'm going to try and press it against me so that I kind of just try and reduce any sort of wobbling. I'm going to go in towards my posture. Now what you can see, hopefully you can see that laser pen there. And I'm going to use the difference in the artificial turf here just to sort of resemble obviously a straight line and to see what needs to happen. So if I sort of swing back, what we're basically looking for is just a nice curvature. Okay, see the way it's a consistent curve coming in towards this backswing position and coming in towards this downswing position. What we're not looking for is obviously our early hip extender would be more prone to moving this way. So sending that laser pen shooting out towards that right hand side. That's definitely what we don't want to see. We want to see a nice consistent curve And then all of a sudden, when you start doing this exercise, you might start to realize, hang on, it's not maybe as downward facing as you possibly made it feel. And that's another big problem that I think golfers tend to do to try and compensate for early hip extension. So let's just explore that a little bit more. So I seem to meet a mixture of golfers. Some golfers that kind of move more this way and lose their hip line, and some golfers that move more this way and they still lose the hip line. Might not be identified as an early hip extension, but it's still a poor pivoting action. So what is the difference? Well, if you were to practice that laser pen drill, you'll quickly identify how your transition should feel. So for our early hip extender, somebody who's moving much more this way and shooting the laser pen out towards that right hand side, they will need to feel more downward facing. But for our golfer who gets quite spinny, which is the opposite sort of problem. This is the type of golfer I think that's trying to combat early hip extension, try and get that pelvis pointing back down towards that lead side. But see the way my trail hip kicks off that tush line immediately. And again, you can imagine that laser pen would just not be following a consistent curve. So both are poor pivoting problems, and that's why they'll both feel very, very different. So you've done your laser pen drills and you're starting to identify how transition should feel to you, but how do you put that in towards a golf swing? Well, one of my favorite exercises is a very simple stepping exercise. To be able to do this exercise correctly, what you want to do is you want to get set up to your golf ball, put the club behind the ball, and then just position your lead foot by your trail foot and the club therefore opposite your feet. So if you like, you're effectively starting about a foot to the right of the golf ball. Perfect. Now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to sequence still this backswing position. So the next part of this exercise, you just take the club head back a couple of feet. Okay, and this just stops you rotating too soon. Now, what you need to practice is as you now simultaneously complete your backswing position, your lead foot needs to re-establish the place where it originally was, which means it will look like this. Okay, this is the kind of motion that we're effectively looking for. Simple stepping exercise. Now I say simple, but as I keep talking over myself, there's a few things that I would sort of clarify when doing this step drill. The first one is that you can see that I am trying to simultaneously step my lead foot as my club head reaches the climax of its backswing position. That's a big thing that you want to make sure you're doing, because if you start sort of swinging back and then stepping, then you're going to start promoting that sort of spinning out tendency. And if you start kind of, should we say, stepping before you reach the climax, then again, you're going to feel that need to introduce more power than's potentially necessary. So it's really a timing issue that's going to kind of lead to this sort of early hip extension move. So you keep doing this, and what you'll start to identify is how the way that you can move towards your lead side without necessarily shifting all the weight pressure there. So as I keep doing this exercise, and what I'd suggest for you guys, it's quite tiring. You can feel your right leg becoming activated, you feel the right glute becoming activated. And these again are feelings that you want to then try and incorporate towards your golf swing. So when you get yourself set up, you'll start to feel that sort of initial takeaway motion, but then that sort of recentering move, and that recentering move is that sort of stepping sensation. Now once you've done those laser pen drills as well, you'll start to identify how your transition should feel. Should it be downward, or should it just feel like a nice rotation? Well, I think that was going to depend very much on you guys, but hopefully this video has given you a much stronger idea of how you are personally going to combat that early hip extension. Now, if you feel like you need any support, online lessons are available, and they are perfect for just helping, giving you confidence that you're practicing the correct thing. But also you might find this video really interesting because it kind of marries everything we've just talked about together and will help you draw your driver. See you guys again really soon.